I want to bring in CNN safety analyst David Susi. He is a former FAA safety inspector. I mean, David, we look at these numbers, 5 runway incursions in just 2 months, which is a lot when you look at recent years. How worrisome and how unusual is it to see this?
It's very unusual, and I think partly it has to do with the fact that there's been such an increase in traffic just over the last 6 months to a year after this post-COVID kind of travel is increased again. We're back up to the numbers before COVID came out. But part of the problem is that each airport is getting more and more overloaded, and their response to that is to let more airplanes take off, and that's not the right way to go.
Yeah, I mean, that's very alarming. The FAA says it's conducting a sweeping review of its safety practices. What do you think the solution is here, especially considering what you just said?
Well, I think the biggest solution is to start looking at the pacing, the time at which they allow airplanes to get onto the runway. The second thing that they need to do is they need to implement something that Congress approved a long time ago, which was the incident reporting. In other words, there's a way to monitor these aircraft or on the airports exactly where they are. Only about 50% of that, the airports out there have this system in place to help their visualization to know that there is an airplane on the runway or not. And those are things that have to be implemented. Congress can say, hey, we're going to do this and approve it, but then getting the appropriated funds to actually finish those projects, that's what needs to be done. And we need an administrator in place to do that.
The traffic is back up, as you mentioned, but some airlines and airports have struggled with staffing issues. That happened. We saw that during and also after the pandemic. Do you see any connection there?
I really don't. I don't see any direct connection with staffing issues. I see that everyone that is, the incidents I've looked at so far, which does not include this one today necessarily in depth, is that the staffing at the airports can be the issue. The air traffic control staffing, not necessarily the airlines themselves. So they're isolated from these COVID, financial struggles or employment struggles. So that's the focus that needs to be put on this, not on the airlines. The airlines are doing what they need to do. They're just responding to what air traffic is telling them to do.
You mentioned FAA leadership, and we saw Phil Washington, who is the president's embattled pick to lead the FAA, facing some tough questioning in his nomination hearing today. You've called for this stronger leadership for some time now. Is he the right person to lead?
I'm not convinced of that yet. I know that he's under a lot of scrutiny because he doesn't have a lot of aviation background. But in the past, I've talked a lot about the fact that they'll put someone in there because they were an airline captain or because they ran an airline or whatever. That's a whole different world than trying to manage the Federal Aviation Administration. It's all going to be about his ability to put a staff in place that can prioritize safety as the #1 thing. And that's, I think, what's most important. And he did that at DIA, at the airport in Denver. He went into Denver. There were projects that were bad. There were injuries and things happening within those projects. And he put in some very strong safety measures to make sure that that airport went forward the way that it's supposed to. We finally see those things implemented now. So I think that in that realm, he's good at managing those things. What's going to be hard is for him to overcome the fact that he really doesn't have any aviation related experience. So I think Congress is going to beat him up on that.
Yeah, they certainly are. David, thank you for your expertise on this. We do appreciate it. And